Okay, let's go. Welcome back to the MMA Girl Podcast with your host, of course, me, Jess, the MMA Girl. You didn't see me last week because if some of you guys follow me on TikTok, you may have seen that I was at my first ever MMA event in France, of course, where I live. And it was the first time being on the press side of things. And I was able to interview the fighters, some who won, some who lost. I interviewed everyone on the day of the press conference and the weigh-ins. And then on the next day, the Saturday night, I interviewed the winners after the fights happened. So that was my first ever time delving into the world of MMA that I've always dreamed of doing. So I was so happy to be there. I'll link it down below. You won't understand a word I'm saying if you don't understand French, but just to take a look at what I've been doing whilst I've been gone. So that's the news on my front. I hope you guys are all doing good. The month of June, of course, is insanely amazing for all us fight fans because, of course, we have some amazing fights coming up and 2 numbered cards this month. Not 1, but 2. Starting off, of course, with UFC 316 that's happening Saturday night of this week. And, of course, UFC 317 at International Fight Week at the end of the month on the 28th of June. So we really have a lot of things going on. And obviously, I've been gone for a while, so I have a lot of things to talk about that I've noted down for you guys. So let's get cracking into this stuff straight away. I'm just going to go over all my Jon Jones at Tom Aspinall saga notes first and foremost, so that way we get out of the way. We're just tired now of this subject. This is just going on so long, and I just think, as Tom said, let's get the ball rolling in the heavyweight division. He is the undisputed champ. Tom Aspinall from England, from Manchester, is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the UFC, and there's no doubt about it. Jon Jones is not coming back. Of course, what I'm going to say to you guys is not he's not coming back, but everything that's come around the past couple of weeks has just been up and down as usual. So I don't really know where we're at this point. But Jon Jones recently said that if the UFC wanted to come out with the information they could, because Jon Jones has supposedly made it abundantly clear what he would like to do in the future in his career. He has, of course, spoken out on a few podcasts saying that regardless of what happens at the UFC, he would be open to doing some exhibition matches later on in his life, later on in his career. I think that speaking about exhibition matches now is not the thing to do because we're still waiting for the Tom Aspinall fight. So if you could just stop talking about the possible chances of having exhibition matches when you leave the UFC, that would be great because we don't need to talk about that now. Your end of career path / journey, that will come later on. But Jon Jones, please just give us the fight or relinquish your belt, please. Of course, many of you might have noticed on Tom Aspinall's social media, on the 28th of May, he was announcing huge news and we thought it would be fight news. But of course, Tom was not going to leave us hanging for a few days knowing that there's news coming without telling us that it's not for his fight against Jon Jones. He said, sorry guys, if there's any fight news, that will be the UFC that announces it, not me. So of course, the news that came out on the 28th of May was of course not fight news at all, but it was his collab with the sportswear brand Champion, which is a great collaboration for Tom. I think he deserves anything that comes his way. And it's kind of very much befitted to his situation currently. He is the rightful champion. We want you to be the undisputed champion more than anything in the world, I think. Jon Jones, of course, doubled down on the fact that if there are any fight news to come, it would be exclusively coming out via the UFC's social media or Dana White himself, because, of course, people are asking him as well, why can't you speak on the Tom Aspinall situation? He said, I've made it abundantly clear what I want to do from now to the future with my career, and the UFC knows full well what I want to do, what is going to be planned. So they just have to release the information, and that's them taking their time to release it. So is that true? We don't know. I don't believe anything anymore. I've just given up. But, in the meantime, Jon Jones was seen in Thailand at Bang Tao Thailand Muay Thai and MMA gym, well renowned throughout the MMA world, of course, because most, if not all, fighters have at least been once to this gym to train with the world-class trainers that were there, and also do parts of the training camps in this gym in Thailand, including Volkanovski. Robert Whittaker was there not long ago, and Jon Jones was there for a seminar which brought around a huge, apparently, UK crowd. And he then came to Twitter, of course, to thank Tom for the amazing support that he's gotten from the UK fans, because he now has more UK fans than he'd ever imagined, and that was thanks to them in most part for the fact that his seminar was sold out and there were people everywhere. People were so excited, and that's not a shock to me. Jon Jones is one of the best, if not the best, mixed martial artist that ever has lived so far. And why not go to one of his seminars to learn from him? That would be amazing, and that would be an amazing experience. I'd love to do that one day. And there's no doubt that anyone going to his seminar with hopes of becoming an MMA fighter or a mixed martial artist in any kind of sport would have benefited from his seminar. However, always, Jon finds a way to bring it back to Tom Aspinall. Tom will not get what he wants. Jon will not be stripped as the fans want him to be, as Tom Aspinall wants him to be. We don't know what the UFC wants, but I know that Dana White especially loves Jon Jones, so I don't think that he'd be willing to upset Jon Jones in any way, shape or form. Other people that have done, just to mention, a side mention, Bangtao's Thailand's seminar are Jorge Masvidal and Yoel Romero. They've just completed a seminar as well together, and there was a huge turnout as well. So these guys are doing bits with their seminars, and I am here for it. Michael Bisping, of course, got onto Twitter, as he usually does, to defend Tom Aspinall during this whole Twitter frenzy in the last couple of weeks, and said, Jon, you were the youngest champion in UFC history. And there's, of course, a reason for that, because the current champion at that time allowed you to have that fight in order to give you that opportunity, and you seized the opportunity and you won. So why now, when the young bucks are coming up in the heavyweight division, are you stopping them from doing exactly what you wanted to do? And that is just such a good point. And I've heard Michael Bisping say that a few times. He said that recently, but he said it again a couple of months ago. He has been saying it constantly, and a lot of people, of course, are doubling down on what he said. And it's totally true. He just has to put himself in his own position when he was Tom's age or even younger, and say to himself, I could have been at the other receiving end of this kind of holding up the division champion. I don't want to fight this, that, and the other person. That is just exactly what Jon needs to say to himself. If he doesn't want to fight Tom Aspinall, but wants to continue fighting the UFC, he has to relinquish his belt. That's just the way of it. And he's the only fighter that I've ever seen in the history of the UFC that was held up a division as much as this. But anyway, recently Tom Aspinall has congratulated Jon Jones on his retirement, saying, I am now the undisputed heavyweight champion. Let's get the ball rolling on this division. Congratulations on Jon Jones for an amazing career. Happy retirement. Which is, of course, another dig at Jon Jones, because he's, of course, not officially retired yet. But speaking of that, if you guys follow Gordon Ryan, the grappling and jiu-jitsu specialist, Gordon Ryan, who helped Jon Jones during his camp for Stipe's fight, he on Instagram posted a photo of himself and Jon in the gym with other people around him, saying that it was a great retirement camp. He said literally Jon's retirement fight camp. Now, was it a way for Gordon Ryan to get into the mix and throw some jabs at Tom Aspinall, or at least confuse people? Or was it really just a slip up? Because a lot of people were saying Gordon Ryan accidentally announces Jon Jones's retirement, blah, blah, blah. Is that real? I don't know. Other news on Tom Aspinall before I move on to another subject. Tom Aspinall has recently been training with Craig Jones, BJJ legend Craig Jones, and he recently linked up with Paul Hughes when he was in the UK, because of course came to the UK to train with Tom Aspinall. Craig Jones happens to be one of the people that a lot of people are citing as a real help in their fight camps when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it was a nice thing to see, of course, Craig and Tom getting on their business and training for a fight that we don't know about yet, or maybe just training because training's important when you're a fighter. But in any case, I love to see it. So let's go on to Armand Tsarukyan. As you guys may or may not know, Armand Tsarukyan, he is a signed Jackson athlete at Jackson Podcast HQ. So Armand Tsarukyan spends a lot of time in LA at the gym, in the Jackson gym. And so he comes along with other guests on the podcast and talks sometimes about the future he has in the UFC, what's been going on behind the scenes, any updates on new fight news, etc. And the only thing we know about the Armand Tsarukyan situation, being number one contender of the lightweight division, is that he offered Paddy Pimblett a fight, which obviously you may see on Twitter. The tweets are still up. He offered to fight Paddy Pimblett. Paddy then turned him down because for Paddy, Armand Tsarukyan's irrelevant and he's now behind him in the queue for a number one contender spot fight. So Paddy, of course, when he called Armand out, he may have just said that because he wanted to ruffle his feathers, but I don't think initially Paddy wanted to fight with Armand Tsarukyan. Whereas I personally, if I was in Paddy's position, I would still want to fight against Armand Tsarukyan, because if I win that fight, I then move up to number one spot, whereas Paddy's currently number 7. So for me, it's a bit of a shame we're not going to see Armand versus Paddy, but apparently we're going to be seeing Paddy versus Justin Gaethje. No news on when that will happen, but apparently that's the fight that's going to be made. And so Armand Tsarukyan on the Jackson podcast went on to saying that if I'm not fighting Paddy, I think I'm most likely going to be fighting Dan Hooker. So that's what the latest news on Armand's situation is, fighting Dan Hooker. Obviously, he's not in the top 5, Dan, but that would be an amazing fight, and I'd love to see it, and I think the fans would love to see it, because as you know, Dan Hooker was supposed to fight Gaethje back in March, but then he had his hand injury, plus surgery, plus this, that, and the other. So we got Justin Gaethje versus Fiziev, which is a great fight, but we wanted to see Gaethje versus Dan Hooker, and unfortunately, that doesn't look like it's going to be happening anytime soon, or any time at all. For now, we're hearing that Gaethje versus Paddy is on the books, and Paddy has said himself that if he has a fight against Gaethje one day, then he knows exactly what he's going to do with him, and he thinks he will do exactly what he did with Chandler with Gaethje. He'll take him down, either submit him, or then obviously go down with the ground and pound and get the TKO. So we'll see that, Paddy. We'll see. In any case, Armand said on the Jackson podcast that he didn't say he was contemplating leaving the UFC, but he said that if there's no fight proposed to him in the next coming months, then he would be looking to do other things in the meantime, which is why he has been in 2 grappling fights since we last saw him in the octagon at a UFC fight. And he has been, of course, at a fight at Karate Combat, which he won via decision. I spoke to you guys about Karate Combat. If you want to see that fight, it's available on UFC Fight Pass. Go and watch that. It was great. And just recently, last week, he participated in a grappling fight against Patricky Pitbull in a 5-round grappling fight, which he won in the 5th round via rear naked choke. And that was a great thing to see, but no news yet on his UFC return. So I think that he's trying to make himself busy. He's trying to look busy in order to maybe ruffle the feathers of the UFC, saying, you know, if you guys aren't going to get me on any kind of fights that are interesting to me, then I will get busy my own way and deal with myself on my own way. So we all know that Armand doesn't need the money, so he's just in it for the sport. He was just in it for the fun of competing in MMA at the highest level. But if they're not going to propose the right opponents and the right timing for him, then he will be looking elsewhere. Anyway, let's go on to Chimaev du Plessis. This situation is, of course, boiling hot, and we cannot wait for the fight in August. That is just insane. 2 months to go, June, July, August. We'll be seeing Hamza Chimaev versus the current middleweight UFC champion, Dricus du Plessis from South Africa. But of course, he hasn't got an even easy opponent in front of him, with Chimaev being the boogeyman of the middleweight division. And according to some sources, Armand Tsarukyan will be assisting Chimaev in his training camp, because Chimaev is 2 categories above Tsarukyan, and Tsarukyan said that he needs smaller bodies so he doesn't get injured in order to have someone to roll around with. So that's what's going on right now. And Chimaev has also brought down Darren Till and an unnamed Olympic legend to his fight camp in Dubai in order to prepare for Dricus du Plessis. And I think Tsarukyan's most likely going to be training with him when he comes back to the States for the fight. So that's all the news we have on his fight camp for now. Chimaev has been working hard. You can see it on social media. He's training every day, in and out. But I think both guys are probably working extremely hard. So we'll be seeing that come to fruition in August. And I can't wait. Next up, I don't know if you heard a bit about Nate Diaz currently coming out with statements that are very funny. Nate Diaz always coming out with some very funny statements, of course, as usual. He recently said that he was offered the role to play Conor McGregor's character in the remake of Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal. But when he found out it was going to be alongside Jake Gyllenhaal and he was going to be fighting Jake Gyllenhaal in the film and losing to him, he said that I ain't I ain't going in no movie and losing to no Brokeback Mountain. And that's a real quote from Nate Diaz. And I think for most of you who know Nate Diaz, that is just word for word the sort of thing he'd say. But I just found that super funny because I would have loved to see Nate Diaz in a film. I don't think he's done any films, but if he has, let me know down in the comments down below if you've seen them. But I've not seen him acting at all, and I don't know how that would go about on the screen, but I would have loved to see how that would have happened. I think Conor did a great job, but who knows what that would have been like in in a Roadhouse movie with Jake Gyllenhaal and Nate Diaz. That would have been crazy. I just want to remind you guys, this is the same person that in 2019 called out Jorge Masvidal for a rematch, and then in 2020 saw that tweet and thought that was Jorge calling him out, and so he called himself out via the tweet that he tweeted out a year before. This is the same guy that did that, and that's all I'm going to be saying right now. Some of you guys may have heard last week John Anik on a podcast he was on was saying, here's your latest breaking news. He believes that Balal versus Shavkat was a done deal for October of this year. And that came out straight away as soon as he said it, because of course when you announce a fight like that, people are publishing it everywhere as soon as it comes out of your mouth. But unfortunately, just as someone tweeted that out saying John Anik had broke the news, the manager of Shavkat said, lol, not at all. So the news on that front, I'm not sure what it is. But of course, as you guys know, last year in October, the fight between Shavkat and Balal was supposed to happen. But unfortunately, Balal got injured. And then when Balal was rescheduled to retain his title this year, he was of course supposed to fight Shavkat, but then Shavkat was injured, which then came of course Jack Della Maddalena's opportunity, which of course he seized and got the belt. So now that Balal has no longer got the belt, I don't think Shavkat is interested in fighting him. If I've understood correctly, I think that's why this fight will no longer happen unless Shavkat wants to fight, absolutely, and there's no fight planned for the title for him yet. But I think Shavkat needs a title shot, and I think he's in line for a title shot before the Ian Garys, the Sean Bradys of this world, because he was promised it last year. Or will they do as they're doing with Armand Tsarukyan right now? You got injured just before the fight. We're not going to be prioritizing you for a title shot unless the other guys say that they want to fight right now. But I don't think that will happen because I think Sean Brady's willing to wait. He's willing to even fight Ian Gary, as I heard Sean Brady said. So in the welterweight division, I think the guys are much more chill. They know, of course, Islam's going to be fighting Jack next. Once Islam, of course, fights Jack Della Maddalena, depending on the outcome, of course, we'll be seeing a rematch maybe for the bout for Balal Muhammad. But first and foremost, we'll be seeing the number one contender Sean Brady have his go at it, probably after his Ian Gary fight, if that's what happens in the end. Or maybe we'll be seeing Shavkat versus Islam Makhachev if Islam wins against Jack. Or maybe Jack versus Shavkat first. So everything's a bit up in the air for the welterweight division, but at least they're much more chill than the guys at lightweight or at bantamweight or at featherweight or at heavyweight. So I can't wait to see what's next for the welterweight division. Next up, we have some news on Kamaru Usman. Of course, Kamaru is very close to his fight against Joaquin Buckley. Buckley is a new and very exciting contender in the welterweight division. And some would say Usman is in for a real fight against Buckley, which is not what some would say. I would say as well. But apparently, Buckley has been training and working on his legendary high kick, which produced one of the most insane KOs in UFC history, and one of the KOs that you must have imprinted in your brain once you've seen it. And he's been working on that high kick a lot in this camp in order to maybe do what Leon Edwards did to Kamaru Usman, but potentially that would be great in the second or third round instead of the fifth. But he's been working a lot on that high kick. But I just think in any case, Joaquin Buckley is a very complete fighter, and it was going to be a huge challenge for Kamaru Usman. And I think Usman's going to have to work a lot on his grappling in this fight to capitalize on his grappling abilities compared to Joaquin Buckley's abilities on the ground. I think that's definitely where he's going to have to go. We're going to see him in the clinch. We're going to see him take him down, unless he wants to stay on the feet, because obviously Kamaru Usman's a world-class striker as well, but he's a lot better on the ground. So maybe we'll be seeing this go to the ground, guys. Anyway, check out his YouTube channel. I'm talking about, of course, Kamaru Usman. Check out Kamaru's YouTube channel because he's doing some videos on his fight camp featuring Justin Gaethje, featuring his coach, going through some day in my life. So it's quite nice to see him show us a bit of a day in his life in his training camp for Joaquin Buckley's fight. So can't wait to see that fight. Next bit of news comes from Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar, of course, the last person to have fought Merab Dvalishvili, who is fighting this weekend to defend his belt. And of course, Merab won that fight via decision. Since he fought Merab, Umar had an injury that had lasted a long time. And he has just fully recovered from the injury just now. So he tweeted back in camp last week. So he's back at training. He's back full time in training right now. So he should be coming back soon after his long absence. And he then tweeted out that he's ready for a fight in October. So is there possible fight news to come? That is the question that's being raised. If he's saying I'm ready for a fight in October, I think that his fight's probably a done deal and he's just waiting for the UFC to post about it. So that's huge news on the Umar Nurmagomedov front. Next up, we're going to be talking about Volkanovski and Yair Rodriguez because, of course, as you guys may have heard, Yair Rodriguez is next up in line for a title shot against Alexander Volkanovski, of course, in the featherweight division. He recently won the belt that was relinquished by none other than Ilia Topuria, who is fighting at the end of this month against Charles Oliveira in the lightweight division. First lightweight fight for Ilia Topuria. But Volkanovski, being the new featherweight champion, of course, has a lot of people that want that belt, and that includes Yair Rodriguez, who recently won via decision at UFC 314 against Patricio Pitbull, a newcomer to the UFC, of course, former Bellator champion. Now, apparently, according to Yair Rodriguez, Hunter Campbell promised him a fight and said that if you win at UFC 314, then you are next in line for a title fight. So we can't say anything about that, guys. That has been said and done. Hunter made that promise. Obviously, that's ruffled a few feathers because a lot of people are saying, what about Evloev? Evloev is clearly the number one contender here. Evloev is clearly the next one in line. And so that just completely erases all hopes for Jack Della Maddalena to have a card where it's Russia versus Australia, because the next time Jack's going to be fighting, of course, will be against a Russian in Islam Makhachev. But the next time that Alex is going to be fighting will be against Yair Rodriguez, who is not Russian at all. So that's a shame on that front. But I didn't really mind hearing that Yair was getting that fight. I just don't understand why Evloev is being overlooked that much. So there may be things happening behind the scenes that we're not hearing about. But in any case, their fight is scheduled or is going to be booked for UFC's 320 Guadalajara in Mexico. It won't be happening at Noche UFC. It'll be just happening in Guadalajara in Mexico. But for UFC Noche, that will be happening potentially in the US now, not in Mexico. And there are a few fights that have been rumored for UFC Noche, including Morales, who we saw beat a legend in Gilbert Burns a couple of weeks ago, and he'll be facing potentially Leon Edwards, number 4 ranked contender in the welterweight division. Now, again, this welterweight division is full of surprises, and I think that a lot of people are saying, of course, Morales will obliterate Leon Edwards 100%. I think that Leon Edwards is a great striker. That's his main forte. So I don't think we'll be seeing a Leon Edwards getting knocked out in the first like Gilbert Burns. But Gilbert Burns is a world-class striker, but of course specializes mostly on the ground. Will we be seeing a better match between Morales and Leon Edwards, or will we be seeing another older legend get KO'd by this newcomer in Morales, who is undefeated for now? And I'd love to see him at Noche UFC. The other fight that's been rumored for Noche UFC is Jean Silva versus Diego Lopez. And that fight, honestly, would be insane. And I'd love to see how that would happen. Of course, Diego coming off a loss against Alexander Volkanovski for the vacant UFC featherweight title. He's very hungry to get a victory and get back into the win column. Whereas, of course, Jean Silva has not lost at the UFC to date and is looking to keep that up, I think, for the rest of his UFC career. But as we know, that's just not possible. You can't stay undefeated for your whole UFC career unless you're John Jones. We'll see if Jean Silva, how he fares against Diego Lopez, if that happens at UFC's Noche UFC event. For now, that's just rumors, so we don't know what's happening. But at least we know Yair Rodriguez versus Volkanovski for the featherweight belt is in the works for UFC 320 at Guadalajara in September. Also on the rumours front, we have Jean Silva again being rumoured to be fighting Arnold Allen at UFC 318 in New Orleans. Of course, New Orleans being UFC 318 the last fight for Dustin Poirier, of course, against none other than Max Holloway. And that would be a great fight to add to this card. I would love that. There are a lot of fights been added to the New Orleans card recently, but I don't see John Silver versus Arnold Allen being announced for that card. I think it would be announced already if that was happening, but maybe there'll be some last minute decisions and they could maybe add that to the card. John Silver, I think, is ready whenever the UFC may need him. He doesn't really need much of a camp. He's always in shape and he's always so hungry and ready to get back in that octagon. In other news, of course, Ankalaev still waiting to defend his light heavyweight belt. He has been saying that his title reign is going to be free reign for everyone. The door is open for anybody who wants to fight him. So whilst Ankalaev is champion, any challenger is welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Ank. So other news on UFC New Orleans. We have Aliskerov versus Bruno Ferreira. That's been booked for UFC New Orleans. That's been validated, booked, and announced. Can't wait to see Bruno Ferreira coming back into the octagon. We've, of course, seen Aliskerov again already this year. KO his opponent very easily in the first round. So we'll be seeing him come back to New Orleans on the 19th of July next month for the Diamond Dustin Poirier's farewell card. I don't know if you guys noticed last week, the UFC introduced some new badges. They're like sewn on patches to the fight gear for every fighter that's debuting and then their first fight at the UFC. So if it's your first UFC fight and you're debuting at the UFC, you're going to be having to wear the sort of patch saying UFC debut. And I didn't notice them on Saturday. There were two fighters on the prelim card. As you know, I do watch all the prelims, and I did not notice those patches on their shorts. I didn't catch them. So they were there, but they're not very noticeable. So if the UFC were putting them there for our references, for us to notice, I think they need to be a little bit bigger, or maybe just put a little graphic on the screen next to their name with UFC debut marks on it so that we know this is their UFC debut. That's what the UFC are wanting to do. So that's what's happening. So I didn't notice it, but let me know if you guys noticed the two fighters on the prelims that were wearing patches on their shorts saying UFC debut, because I did not see that. Anyway. So that was that. For me, in any case, I'm very happy because the UFC have just announced that they will be returning to Paris in September. I knew that already because obviously I'd spoken to some of the UFC staff in London when I was at the Fighters Hotel. But of course, when nothing has been announced yet, you can't get excited because at any moment with the world of fighting, we don't know what could be happening. So I then, of course, was waiting patiently. I saw other events being announced for September. And of course, as you guys know, all UFC events that happen in France happen in September or have happened in September, at least for the last 3. So, of course, this time round, I was expecting another September card for Paris. And I just, by the process of elimination, predicted that it would be the 6th of September. And I'm not saying that just because it is the 6th of September, but I actually did say that in a couple of podcasts a few weeks ago. So it is actually happening on the 6th of September. They've just announced it and I'll be there. We are the only country, as I've said before, I say we, but I'm not from France, but of course I live in France. So I'm directly affected by the fact that we are the only country that buys our UFC ticket events before the fights are announced. And that is the only, I've not seen any other country have to deal with that. I, of course, don't mind because I would go, even if it's not particularly a card that's interesting to me, because the experience, of course, the fighters themselves are obviously nice to see in person. We are the only ones who don't get to choose who we see. I don't want to buy my tickets and then see Cyril Gane's not going to be there like last year. I don't want to buy my tickets, get my hopes up that Benoit Saint-Denis and Gamrot's going to be happening, because that may not happen, or that Nasruddin Imavov versus Sean Strickland 2 is happening when it doesn't. So we are really basing ourselves off of nothing when we buy our tickets, and that just goes to show how dedicated the UFC fans in France are, because they're one of the biggest crowd reactions that the UFC has ever seen, and we are going to events when we don't know who's going to be fighting. That's how much we love UFC, and that's how much we are desperate to see the UFC, because of course one event a year is not a lot. We jump on the occasion, of course, to go there. So if really we have to wait until after we bought the tickets to know who's going to be fighting, that's not a problem to us, of course, but it would be nice to know who's fighting beforehand, the UFC. Anyway, I'm just saying, we're the only guys who have to buy our tickets before knowing who's fighting, so just saying. Of course, if you guys watched last week's pay-per-view at UFC Vegas 107, you may have a little bit of a horrible taste in your mouth because, of course, the main event between Erin Blanchfield and Macy Barber was, of course, cancelled at the last minute before the walkouts happened. So it wasn't even just, cancelled at the last minute the day before or the day of. It was literally seconds before Erin Blanchfield was going to make her walkout. Now, that was really, really disappointing because we had an okay card. It was a good card. It wasn't a bad card. I wouldn't say it was one of the worst pay-per-views of the year, some people are saying, but it was obviously not a highly anticipated card to begin with because it was the Apex. And then to hear that Macy Barber was having seizures and couldn't compete was really sad to hear. Of course, good luck to Macy for a speedy recovery. I hope everything goes well. She, of course, missed weight on the day before that on Friday. She was over by 1.5 pounds. So, of course, she was going to give 20% of her purse due to being over the weight limit. And now, of course, they have been paid despite not having competed. And Erin Blanchfield did confirm she got her 20% from Macy Barber, and plus her winning bonus and her original salary, because it wasn't obviously her fault that she had to pull out. Erin was, of course, very angry. She was not happy with that, saying that she needs to sort her life out, that she didn't want to fight her anymore. Of course, this fight was supposed to happen first last year, but it was cancelled. So this fight was a rescheduled bout, cancelled again. She does not want to see Macy Barber ever again. Macy, of course, responding, saying, listen, I'm not the one who decided to pull out of this fight. This was a doctor's order. The doctor obviously saw me having a seizure, pulled me out of this fight. There's no choice. We as fans, of course, were disappointed, but we have to put ourselves in a position of the doctor who is analysing Macy's health and saying, you just had a seizure. You can't go out and compete in an MMA fight over 5 rounds, potentially 25 minutes, where you might collapse and have an even worse injury or health problems due to that. So it's obviously normal that the doctor pulled her out of that fight. It's just, of course, frustrating when you're sat in front of your television, especially for us European fans who wait up until 6 a.m. to go to bed because they're watching the fights during the night, and then to be in front of the TV screen waiting for the main event to come out, and then you're just thinking, this isn't good. I was seeing the time going by. I was saying to myself, that's not good. Where's Erin Blanchfield? Where's Macy Barber? Why is no one coming out? The co-main event just went by. It went to decision. So, of course, as fans, we know when a fight goes to a decision, there's not a lot of time between the end of that fight and the start of the other fight. So I was thinking to myself, in a couple of minutes, we'll be seeing this fight happen. And it just didn't happen. So that was very, very disappointing. But that's life. That's the fighting world, Great fight from Gamrot as the co-main event became the main event without knowing it. He called out, of course, BSD again, which is why I talked about BSD versus Gamrot for September, because he's ready. Gamrot says, we're in the month of May, as of course that happened last week. So May, June, July, August, September, that's plenty of time for him to recover, rest up, and get back into a fight camp for BSD. And as BSD said after his fight at Montreal, he would be more than happy to fight Gamrot, even though he did refuse that fight to replace the scheduled Alvarez. Gamrot called him out for a 5-round main event fight in Paris. I'm not sure, depending on who's on the card, of course, but I'm not sure that would be the main event if we had, for example, Nasruddin Imavov or Cyril Gane, of course, on the card. They would be more likely the main eventers than BSD versus Gamrot. But a 3-round co-mainer or a 3-round main card fight for both guys would be a great thing to think about for UFC's Paris event. But we have no news on that yet. One notable victory from UFC Vegas 107 was, of course, the return of the Monkey Man, Jordan Levitt. And I was really happy to see him come back because we've not seen him since, I think, 2022, if I'm not mistaken, or 2023. And he had quite a long absence because he had a child. He had 2 children even between the time he left the UFC and came back this year. He is now a father of 2. He has been through quite a bit of a rocky mental health journey, but is now back, and he won against quite a spectacular Hollowbow. Even though he's a veteran, older fighter, he is hard to submit. He's only been submitted once in his whole entire career, and the Monkey Man comes and does it in just 1 round with a spectacular sub, and I loved to see it. The Monkey Man is back. I can't wait to see the Monkey Man back in the octagon now. And as we've seen with a couple of fights like this, when the fight ends early and easily for one of the two fighters, Dana White and Hunter Campbell tend to like to book them quite quickly in another fight. For example, Barrio, who won his fight via first round KO at UFC's Montreal event last month, he is going to be fighting in July in Abu Dhabi, despite the fact that he fought only a month ago, because he got no damage. The fight camp went really well. The cut went really well. No damage during the fight. So why not back-to-back fights? Why not? Of course, it's tiring, but when you can, then do it. So I think this is a great opportunity for the Monkey Man to come back into the octagon as soon as possible. And I'm sure that if Hunter Campbell or Dana White or both of them propose a fight to him, he will, of course, accept that fight. He wants to get back in the win column as much as possible. He is back in the win column. He's back at the UFC and he's back in business. So I think he'd be more than happy to accept another fight coming out of his absence. Let me know what you guys thought of UFC Vegas 107. It did, of course, leave a bit of taste in our mouths as fight fans, but that's life. Of course, not every pay-per-view goes as planned. Not every event goes as planned. Do you think that they should continue doing these Apex events, or are you guys tired of these Apex events? I'm not personally tired of them. I just think we should do less and less Apex events. Maybe once a month if they really want to. I don't really know how many Apex events there are because they're a bit random, but we get sometimes 2 Apex, 1 numbered card and 1 arena card for a fight night. I'd love to see maybe once a month or once every 2 months. That would be great. Just, simmer them out a bit because we're no longer in the COVID period. There's no epidemic that's preventing us from having fight cards happen in the right places, in arenas. And there are, of course, plenty more fans than there even ever used to be before the COVID epidemic happened, for all the arenas to be filled where they're going to be selling arena cards. I just think they maybe know that this kind of card, for example, UFC Vegas 107, that would not have sold enough pay-per-view buys, and that wouldn't have maybe sold out their arena. If we do less Apex cards, we need to do more exciting cards. That way people will come to the arenas. That way people will buy the pay-per-view when offered to buy it. That's something to think about. But what do you guys think of Apex cards? Are you tired of that, or do you not mind there being Apex cards again since, of course, COVID is finished? Now, that is it for today's podcast episode. I'm going to be doing a second video on this channel at the end of the week because, of course, UFC 316 is happening on Saturday. And the video will be pertaining to all the news surrounding UFC 316 and, of course, my predictions and preview of that numbered card from the UFC. And, of course, the card we've all been waiting for the last couple of weeks. It's been tough. So let me know your predictions for UFC 316 in the comments down below. Of course, tune into my video when it's coming out. Thank you very much for tuning back into my podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Like, comment, subscribe as usual. And yeah, let's see each other next week for a new episode going over UFC 316 and all that good stuff. Bye.